You know when you realize you've gone from being a person to just being present? It was on a Wednesday during breakfast. My oldest son was talking about selling the beach house as if I wasn't sitting there at the table. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something colder, clearer. What they didn't know is that I had already realized it a long time ago. And when you realize it early, you don't need to rush, you just need to wait. My name is Robert. I am 71 years old. I worked 43 years as a civil engineer, built 3 houses with my own hands, raised 2 sons and a daughter, and buried my wife Margaret 4 years ago. For 4 decades, family gatherings took place at my house every second Sunday of the month. I organized the barbecue, Margaret made the desserts, and the porch table was full until sunset. After Margaret passed away, I thought things would change in form, but not in essence. I was wrong. I continued receiving my children, their wives, their husbands, my 5 grandchildren, but something changed in the air. At first it was subtle. Tom, my oldest son, started arriving earlier, always with that look of someone who had unfinished business. He would bring his wife, Linda, and the 2 of them would stay in the kitchen with me talking about health, about food, about whether I was taking my medication correctly. I found it strange, but I thought it was concern. A son's affection. You understand how we want to believe in good intentions, right? Then came Rachel, my middle daughter. She started asking if I remembered where I had kept certain documents, deeds, insurance policies, will. She said it was just to organize them, in case I needed something quickly. It made sense, but the way she asked seemed rehearsed, as if she had coordinated it with someone beforehand. I didn't confront her. I just answered calmly and kept the information to myself. And then came the moment that changed everything. It was at one of those monthly meetings about 8 months after Margaret had left. We were all on the porch. I talked about the beach house, the one I bought in 1986, when the boys were still small. I said I was thinking of spending a few months there, enjoying the time I had left in peace. Silence. No one answered. Tom exchanged a look with Rachel. Rachel looked down. And David, my youngest son, simply changed the subject. As if I hadn't said anything, that's when I realized it. I had become furniture. If you've ever felt this way, or if someone close to you has gone through something similar, leave a comment below about where you're hearing this story from. Tell me your city, your state. Because stories like this don't happen on their own. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now. I'll need you to stay with me until the end. This is going to get interesting. I started paying attention in a different way, not with suspicion but with clarity. I realized that the conversations began when I left the room, that the phone calls between them increased, that my children started visiting each other more often but rarely included me. When I asked about these meetings, the answer was always vague. "Oh, we just stopped by quickly. It was a last-minute thing, Dad. I didn't insist. I've never been one to insist." One afternoon, Tom showed up with a friend of his, a real estate agent. He said the guy was passing by and wanted to see the house. He praised the structure, the land, the location. He asked technical questions. I answered everything politely. After he left, Tom stayed. He told me that maybe it was time to think about something smaller. "You're getting old, Dad. This house is too big. Stairs, garden, maintenance. It doesn't make sense for you to stay here alone." I looked at him. I took a deep breath, and I simply said, "I'll think about it." He seemed satisfied. He left with a smile, but I already knew. It wasn't about my comfort, it was about liquidity, about turning bricks into cash, and I wasn't at the center of that equation. I was just the obstacle. Rachel also started acting differently. She began visiting me alone, always with a folder under her arm. Documents for me to sign. Power of attorney to make things easier if I got sick. Authorization for her to access my bank account, only in emergencies. She explained everything calmly, with affection, as if she were protecting me. I signed what I thought was reasonable and refused what didn't make sense. She was frustrated, but she hid it well. David, the youngest, was the most distant. He always had been, but lately he'd started treating me like a child. He spoke slowly to me. He repeated things. He asked if I understood. That hurt more than I expected. Not because he was wrong about my age. But because he'd decided that age meant inability, and that, you know, is different. One day Rachel took me to the doctor. A routine checkup, she said, but during the appointment she kept asking strange questions. Has he been forgetting things, doctor? Does he get confused about dates? Wouldn't it be good to assess his cognitive abilities? The doctor examined me. He did some basic tests. At the end he looked at Rachel and said, "Your father is lucid and healthy, there's nothing wrong." Rachel thanked him but left disappointed. I realized it early on. The monthly meetings continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Before we were one table. Now we were two groups, them and me. They talked amongst themselves. I sat there listening. Every now and then someone would throw me a polite question, the kind you ask an elderly person in a nursing home. "Hey Dad, how's the weather? Did you sleep well this week?" Questions that don't expect a real answer. I answered, but I knew nobody was really listening. I started testing. On purpose. In one of those meetings I mentioned an investment I had made, shares in a company I had been following for years. I explained the numbers, the strategy, the timing. Tom looked at his cell phone. Rachel cut a slice of cake. David laughed at something his grandson had said. Nobody reacted to what I said. It was like shouting in an empty room, so I did something different. I mentioned in the middle of lunch that I'd seen a purple dog crossing the street. Nobody blinked. Nobody asked. Nobody thought it was strange. I could have said anything. The truth is, I no longer existed as an interlocutor. I was just scenery. Their phone calls became more frequent. I knew because sometimes they forgot to hang up properly, or because Rachel would leave her phone on the table and I'd see her siblings' names in the notifications. They were planning something, and that something included me, but it didn't count on me. That's when Tom scheduled a meeting. He called it a family talk. He said it was important, that everyone needed to be there. He scheduled it for a Saturday at his house. I arrived on time. They were all already there. Sitting in the living room, looking like they were at a funeral, Tom started talking. He said they were worried about me, that I was getting older, that living alone was dangerous, that I could fall, hurt myself, forget the stove on, Rachel added. She talked about assisted living, good comfortable places where I would have company, care, activities. David was straightforward. He said the house was in my name, but that it made more sense to sell now, while the market was hot. That the money could pay for years of upkeep, that it was the most sensible thing to do. They even had quotes. 3 locations, photos, values, timeline. I listened to everything. I didn't interrupt. When they finished, I thanked them for their concern. I said I would think about it. They seemed relieved. They thought I had accepted. But what I had done was buy time. I left Tom's house with a clear head. They weren't wrong about my age. 71 is 71. The body gets tired. Memory fails here and there. But what they were wrong about was me. I wasn't senile, I wasn't lost, and most importantly, I wasn't theirs to manage. I arrived home and went straight to the office. I opened the drawer where I kept my important documents. Everything was there, deeds, will, powers of attorney I had signed for Rachel. I read everything again carefully, and I realized something. The power of attorney I gave her was too broad. It allowed her to manage my account, sign contracts, sell assets, all in my name but without my real consent. The next day I went to the notary's office. I revoked the power of attorney. Simple as that. The notary asked me if I was sure. I said yes. He registered it. That was it. Rachel lost access. Then I called my lawyer, an old friend, Robert Sinclair. He'd known me for 30 years. I explained the situation. He didn't seem surprised. He said it was common. Impatient children, vulnerable parents. He asked what I wanted to do. I replied, "Protect what's mine until I decide what to do with it." He understood. Sinclair suggested a trust, a legal structure where I would continue to control everything as long as I was alive and lucid, but which prevented anyone from making decisions for me without a court order. I thought it was perfect. We signed the papers, the house, the investments, the beach house. Everything was transferred to the trust. I was the sole administrator. I was the only one who could change the rules. I didn't tell anyone. I went back home. I continued living normally. I continued seeing my children. I continued going to the meetings. They thought I was processing the idea of the residential complex, that I was softening up. Tom even sent me more photos of an excellent place in the countryside. I thanked him. I said it looked beautiful. Rachel called me. She asked if I had thought about the conversation. I said yes. She asked if I needed help organizing things. I said no, that I could still take care of my paperwork. She insisted. I politely refused. She hung up, annoyed. They thought I didn't understand, that my calmness was confusion, that my silence was acceptance. But what they didn't know is that I was just observing how far they would go. Because when you realize something early, you don't act early. You wait and observe. The next family gathering was tense. I could feel it in the air. Tom was impatient. Rachel, nervous. David, distant as always. They wanted an answer, a decision. I didn't give them one. I just smiled, ate my barbecue, played with the grandchildren. I acted as if nothing was happening, and that irritated them. After lunch, Tom called me to talk in the backyard. He said they needed an answer, that they couldn't keep stalling, that they had lives, jobs, responsibilities, that they couldn't keep chasing after me forever. I asked, "Who asked you to chase after me?" He was speechless. He changed his tone. He said it was for my own good, that I deserved a break, that they just wanted to see me happy. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Tom, I'm happy here." He took a deep breath. He said I was being stubborn, that I was putting everything at risk. I asked, "What risk?" He stammered. He spoke of health, of loneliness, of dangers. I just shook my head and went back inside. Rachel tried a different approach. She called me midweek. She said she'd found a buyer interested in the house, someone who would pay well, above market value, that it was a unique opportunity, that if I signed soon, in 60 days, I'd have the money in my account and be moving into the residence. Everything resolved. I asked, "You showed my house to someone without telling me?" She remained silent. Then she said it was just an informal evaluation. I hung up. David showed up out of nowhere on a Friday. He said he needed to talk. He sat on the porch with me. He was the most honest of the three. He said they were worried, yes, but that they were also tired, that they had their own families, that they didn't have time to manage my life, that the easiest thing for everyone was for me to accept the change. I thanked him for his honesty, but I didn't change my position. They started avoiding me. The calls decreased, the visits too. The monthly meeting in June was cancelled. Tom said he was going to travel. Rachel said she had a lot of work piled up. David didn't even reply. I knew what was happening. They were trying to pressure me into leaving. They thought the loneliness would break me, that I would beg to come back. I stopped explaining myself. July passed. August too. No meetings. Very few phone calls. I continued my routine. I woke up early, tended to the garden, read my books, watched my documentaries. Twice a week I went to the market. Once a week I had lunch with Sinclair, my lawyer. He kept me informed, and he let me know when something changed. It was a Wednesday. Sinclair called me. He said he had received an extrajudicial notification. Rachel was trying to initiate guardianship proceedings. She claimed that I was no longer capable of managing my assets, that I was in a vulnerable situation, that I needed a guardian, and she offered herself as my guardian. I took a deep breath. Sinclair asked if I was surprised. I said no. I expected it. He asked what I wanted to do. I said, "Nothing yet. Let them advance." Sinclair found it strange. He said the ideal thing was to counterattack quickly. I asked him to trust me. He agreed. Rachel didn't call to let me know. She simply filed a report. She thought I wouldn't find out, or that if I did find out I wouldn't understand, or that if I did understand I wouldn't be able to react. She was wrong on all 3 counts. Tom called me 2 days later. He didn't mention the lawsuit. He spoke of pleasantries. He asked how I was, if I needed anything. He was testing me, trying to gauge if I knew. I pretended everything was normal. I said everything was fine. He seemed relieved. He said he would visit me on the weekend. He didn't show up. David texted me. Short text. "Dad, we need to talk." I didn't reply. He insisted. "It's serious." I still didn't reply. He gave up. The hearing was scheduled for September. Sinclair prepared me. He explained the process. He said the judge would want to hear from me. To assess my condition, that he would probably request a psychiatric report. I said I was ready. He smiled. He said he had never seen a client so calm in the face of an interdiction. I arrived at the hearing before everyone else. Sinclair was beside me. When Rachel entered, she almost tripped when she saw me. She expected me not to show up, or to appear confused. I was in a suit, clean-shaven, lucid. Tom and David were with her. The three of them sat on the other side of the room. They didn't look at me. The judge came in. He read the case file. He asked Rachel why he thought I needed a guardian. She began to speak. She said I was isolated, that I refused help, that I made irrational decisions, that I had revoked powers of attorney without reason, that I was putting my assets at risk. The judge looked at me. He asked if I wanted to answer. I said yes. I stood up slowly. I looked at the judge, then at my children. I took a deep breath and began. "Your Honor, my name is Robert Allen Carter. I am 71 years old. I am a retired civil engineer. I worked for 43 years. I built bridges, schools, hospitals. I raised 3 children. I buried my wife. And as far as I know, I still know who I am, where I am, and what I am doing here." I paused. "My daughter says I'm isolated. That's true. After she and her siblings decided that my presence at family gatherings was just a formality, I preferred to distance myself. She says I refuse help. That's also true. I refuse help that I didn't ask for and don't need. She says I revoke powers of attorney without reason. False. I revoke powers of attorney that put me at risk of losing my autonomy." The judge was taking notes. Rachel was pale. "She says I make irrational decisions. I'd like to know which ones. Would selling my house against my will be rational? Would placing me in a housing complex I didn't choose be rational? Would transferring my assets to make life easier for someone who wants to liquidate my property be rational? Your Honor, I'm not confused. I'm lucid. And that's precisely why I'm resisting." The judge asked for silence in the room. Tom had shifted in his chair. David was looking at the floor. Sinclair stood up. He presented documents, recent medical reports, organized bank statements, proof that the trust had been created legally and consciously. A statement from my doctor attesting to my full capacity. Everything dated, signed, and registered. The judge analyzed the situation. He asked Rachel if she had proof of incapacity. She stammered. She said it was just my impression, that she seemed confused, that she sometimes forgot things. The judge asked if she had any medical reports. She said no, that she didn't think it would be necessary. The judge was clear. He said that impressions don't support an injunction. That I was visibly capable, that there was robust documentation proving my lucidity, and that, therefore, the request was denied. Rachel tried to argue. The judge banged the gavel. End of story. I left there with Sinclair. Rachel called me in the hallway. I stopped. She had tears in her eyes. She said she only wanted to protect me. I looked at her and said, "Rachel, you wanted to protect your inheritance, not me." I turned my back and walked away. The following days were silent. None of them called me, no apologies, no acknowledgement of the mistake. I didn't expect it. When people underestimate you and fail, they rarely admit it. They prefer resentment to humility. Sinclair called me a week later. He said Rachel had tried to contest the decision, unsuccessfully, that Tom had sought legal counsel to see if he could annul the trust, also unsuccessfully, that they were, in his words, desperate. I asked why. He said, because they realized they'd lost control. I knew it wouldn't stop there. Desperate people do stupid things, and I was right. 2 weeks later, I received a call. Unknown number. I answered. It was a private investigator. He said he had been hired to assess my situation. He asked invasive questions about my routine, my habits, if I drank, if I used controlled substances, if I had female companionship. I hung up on him. I called Sinclair. I told him. He wasn't surprised. He said it was an attempt to build a dossier, to gather evidence of inappropriate behavior to use in a new legal action. I asked what to do. He said, "Keep being yourself. Don't give them ammunition." I did exactly that. I continued with my life, but I started documenting everything. I photographed my organized refrigerator, my medications in the correct dosage, my well-kept garden, my clean house. Sinclair thought it was excessive. I said it was precaution, and so it was. A month later, Rachel showed up at my door, unannounced, with a social worker. She said she was worried, that she just wanted to take a look to make sure I was okay. The social worker introduced herself. She was polite. I let her in. I showed her the house. Everything was spotless. The woman took notes, asked questions about food, hygiene, medication. I answered everything calmly. In the end, she thanked me, said everything was in order. Rachel remained silent. Before leaving, the social worker handed me a card. She said that if I needed anything, I should just call. I thanked her. When they left, I called Sinclair. He said that it had been an informal inspection, that Rachel was trying to force a reassessment. I asked if it had worked. He laughed. He said, "Robert, you passed with flying colors." I had accepted that our relationship ended the day they decided I was a problem to be solved, not a father to be respected. But they hadn't given up. Tom called me. For the first time in weeks, his voice was different, calm, even affectionate. He said he missed me, that things had gotten out of control, that he only wanted what was best for me. He asked if we could have lunch, alone, without Rachel, without David, without lawyers, just father and son. I hesitated. Not out of naivete, but because part of me still wanted to believe there was genuine remorse there. I accepted. We arranged to meet at a restaurant downtown. I arrived on time. Tom was already there. He stood up and hugged me. He seemed genuine. We ordered our food. We talked about trivial things, the weather, the grandchildren, soccer, nothing serious. Until, in the middle of dessert, his tone changed. "Dad, I was wrong." I looked at him. I waited. "We were wrong. Rachel, me, David. We treated you as if you were incapable. And you're not. We saw that in the hearing. You're lucid, you're okay, you're in control. And I apologize." He paused. He took a sip of water. "But I need to ask you something. This fight is destroying the family. The grandchildren ask about you. My wife is pressuring me. Rachel is in therapy because of this. We need to fix this. And I think the solution is simple." He took a piece of paper out of his pocket. He placed it on the table. "Sign this. It's an agreement. You keep the house, you keep your independence, you keep everything. But appoint us as co-trustees, just to make things easier in the future, if you need to. It's just a formality, a bridge, so we can go back to being a family." I picked up the paper. I read it. It was exactly what he said. But between the lines, what it did was take away my exclusive control. It transformed my decisions into collective decisions. It put me back in the position of being warded. I folded the paper. I gave it back to him. "Tom, I'm not going to sign that." He frowned. "Why? It's reasonable. It's fair." "It's a polite trap." He slammed his hand on the table, low but firm. "You're impossible, Dad. We try, and you just refuse. You'd rather be alone than trust your own children." I got up. I put money on the table to pay my share. "Tom, trust is built. You destroyed mine. Now you want me to give up what's left of me for a piece of paper and an empty promise." "It's not going to happen." I left the restaurant. November brought the cold, and it also brought their last attempt, the most desperate, the most dangerous. David showed up at my door on a Friday night, alone. He said he needed to sleep there, that he'd had a fight with his wife, that he needed some time. I let him. After all, he was still my son. I prepared the guest room. We had dinner together. We talked. He seemed genuine. For the first time in months, I felt that maybe there was a chance. On Saturday morning, I woke up, and he was already in the kitchen, making coffee, going through my things. I thought it was strange, but I didn't say anything. We had coffee together. He said he was going to spend the day with me. He wanted to enjoy himself, reminisce about old times. I agreed. We spent the day in the living room. We watched TV. We talked. He made lunch, simple but delicious. In the afternoon, he suggested we open a bottle of wine I had been saving. I said I didn't drink anymore. He insisted. He said it was just one glass, that it would do me good. I gave in. We had a glass, then another. I started to feel sleepy, very sleepy, more than usual. I told David I was going to lie down for a bit. He said that was fine, that he'd wake me up for dinner. I slept soundly. When I woke up, it was already night. The house was silent. I got up feeling dizzy. I went to the living room. David wasn't there. I went to the kitchen. Nothing. I called for him. No answer. That's when I saw it. My office door was open. I always locked it. I went in. Drawers open. Papers scattered. The small safe I kept under my desk was open. Empty. Inside it, I kept original documents. The deed to the beach house. Some old investment certificates that hadn't yet been transferred to the trust. And a physical copy of the old will, the one that hadn't yet been replaced. David had taken everything. I called Sinclair. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. He answered on the third ring. I told him what happened. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Robert, this is a crime. You need to file a police report." I said I would think about it. He insisted. He said it wasn't the time to be a father. It was time to be a victim aware of his own rights. I hung up. I sat in the office armchair. I took a deep breath. I tried to understand. Had David drugged me? Or was I just too old and tired? It didn't matter. The result was the same. My son had entered my house, waited for me to fall asleep, and stolen my documents. I called him. He didn't answer. I sent a message. "David, return what you took." He saw it. Didn't reply. I called again. Voicemail. Blocked. The next day I went to the police station. I explained the situation. The police officer listened attentively. He asked if I had proof. I said I had evidence of the break-in, the mess, and the missing documents. He said that without witnesses or cameras it would be difficult, but he filed the police report. He gave me the receipt. Sinclair took action. First, he notified David extrajudicially, demanding the immediate return of the documents under penalty of criminal prosecution. David did not respond. Then Sinclair filed a request for a search and seizure warrant. The judge denied it, stating that there was insufficient evidence. That's when Tom called me. "Dad, stop it. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. David took some old papers, he'll return them. But you filing a police report against your own son? That's low." I took a deep breath. "Tom, he drugged me. He broke into my office. He stole my documents. And you think I'm the one being low? Nobody drugged you, Dad. You drank and slept. That's normal at your age. And David didn't steal anything. He took documents that you were going to lose anyway, given how disorganized you are." I hung up. Sinclair called me the next day. He said he'd discovered something. David had tried to use the deed to the beach house to get a loan. The bank refused because the property was in trust, but the attempt was recorded. That was proof of fraudulent intent. We filed a criminal lawsuit, misappropriation, forgery, attempted fraud, everything documented, everything proven. When the summons arrived for David, he panicked. He called me, crying, apologizing, saying he was desperate, that he had debts, that he needed money, that he thought I wouldn't care. I listened to everything and I just said, "David, you underestimated me. Now await the process." "When you stopped listening to me, was I still family?" She hung up crying. Tom showed up at my door. He said he wanted to talk. I let him in. He was direct. "Drop the lawsuit. We'll resolve this internally. David returns the papers and you forget about it. Simple." I asked, what if he had gotten the loan? What if he had sold my beach house? Do you think they would have returned the money? Tom was speechless. Sinclair updated me. The public prosecutor's office had accepted the charges. David was going to face criminal charges. The sentence could range from 1 to 5 years. It would probably be converted to an alternative sentence, but the process would tarnish his record. It would make it difficult for him to get jobs, travel, credit. I felt no pleasure in it, nor sadness, only clarity. Actions have consequences, and my son had chosen the action. Now he faced the consequence. The conciliation hearing was scheduled. Me, David, the lawyers, the prosecutor. David arrived with his head down. He didn't look at me. The prosecutor offered a deal: return of the documents, public retraction, payment of a fine. And David would admit guilt, but without imprisonment. Sinclair looked at me. He asked what I thought. I said I accepted, provided there was an additional clause. David would formally relinquish any rights to my assets. Inheritance, usufruct, anything. He would be disinherited. David lifted his head. Dad, for God's sake. I looked at him. You broke into my house, drugged me, stole my documents, and tried to sell my property. And now you want me to let you inherit what's left, he cried. Sinclair drafted the clause. David signed it. Tom called me that night. He said I'd gone too far, that families don't do that. I replied, Tom, you're right, families don't do that, that's why I did it. Because you stopped being my family the day you turned me into a problem. Rachel sent a message, a long one, full of bitterness. She said I was alone, that I was going to die alone, that my grandchildren would grow up without knowing me, that I would regret it. I read it. I didn't reply. I deleted it. December arrived. My first Christmas alone since Margaret died. I didn't receive any invitations. I wasn't expecting any. I spent the day reading. I cooked for myself. That night, Sinclair called me. He asked how I was. I said I was fine. He insisted, Robert, really, how are you? I took a deep breath. Sinclair, I'm at peace, finally. He laughed. He said I was the most stoic customer he'd ever had. He asked if I didn't miss them. I told the truth. I miss what they were, not what they became. The next day I received a letter. No return address. I opened it. It was from one of my grandsons, the oldest, Tom's son. He said he missed me, that he didn't quite understand what had happened, that his father said I was angry, but that he wanted to see me. That broke me a little, but not enough to change my mind. I replied. I said I wasn't angry with him, that I loved him, but that I needed time, that when he was older, he would understand. I sent it by mail. I don't know if he received it. January of 2026 began quietly. I was 72 years old now. The house was still mine. The belongings were protected. My dignity remained intact. Sinclair visited me once a week. He always brought coffee. We talked about life. He said I should write a book. I laughed. I said no one would believe it. One day Tom texted me. Short text. Dad, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I looked at it. I was tempted to reply, but I didn't, because apologies without change are just words, and I had learned that words without action mean nothing. Rachel stopped contacting me. David disappeared. I never heard from him again after the agreement. I heard from others that he had moved to another state, started over. I hope he learned his lesson. Sinclair asked me if I was going to rewrite my will. I said yes. He asked who I was going to leave everything to. I said, 2 institutions, education, health, places that will use it to build, not to liquidate. He smiled. He said, they're going to freak out when they find out. I replied, they already know, they just don't believe it. I asked what she wanted. She asked to come in. I let her. We sat in the living room. She was different, thinner, older, tired. She started talking. He said he'd spent months in therapy, that he'd understood a lot, that he'd been greedy, selfish, that he'd treated the inheritance as if it were his before it was, that he'd treated me like an obstacle, that he owed me a real apology. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I asked, Rachel, are you here because you realized you were wrong or because you realized you lost? She took a deep breath. Both. At least she was honest. I said I accepted the apology, but that it didn't change anything, that I had made my choices, that she had made hers, and that now we lived with the consequences. She cried. She asked if I would ever forgive her. I said, "Rachel, I already have forgiven you, but forgiving isn't forgetting, and it isn't going back." She left. She didn't try to argue, she didn't try to convince me, she just left. And I stayed there alone, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Lightness. Sinclair finalized the new will. Everything registered, everything protected. My properties would go to educational foundations, my investments to health research, the beach house to a nursing home for at-risk elderly people. Nothing for my children. Nothing for my grandchildren, unless they proved when adults that they had a different character from their parents. Sinclair read the final document. He looked at me. He asked, "Are you sure?" I said, "Absolutely." He signed as a witness. We registered it, done. Tom messaged me 2 weeks later. He said he knew about the will. I don't know how. Sinclair probably mentioned it to someone. He said I was being unfair, that I was punishing them forever, that they had made a mistake but that they deserved a chance. I replied for the first time in months, "Tom, I gave you a chance. You wasted it. Now I choose where what I built goes, and I choose that it goes to someone who will use it with respect." He didn't answer. Today is Sunday, February the 1st, 2026. The sun is shining. The garden is beautiful. I just finished watering the plants. I made coffee. I sat on the porch, and I feel something I haven't felt in years. Control. It's not about money. It never was. It's about dignity, about being heard, about being respected, about not being treated like a burden just because I've gotten old. I built a life. I raised 3 children. I worked for decades. And when I reached the end, they thought they had the right to decide for me. But they forgot one thing. I realized it early on. And when you realize it early, you don't react early. You wait, you observe, you let people show who they really are. And then, when the time comes, you act. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with clarity. I don't know how much time I have left. 72 years is already a lot. Maybe 5 more, maybe 10, maybe tomorrow. But what I do know is that I'm going to spend that time the way I choose, in my house, with my autonomy, without needing to ask permission. My children will inherit a lesson. They won't inherit money. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's worth more. Rachel still calls me from time to time. I answer. We talk about trivial things. I don't forgive beyond what I already have. But I also don't hold grudges. Tom stopped trying. David disappeared. And that's okay. Because family isn't about blood. It's about respect. And respect, you know, is something you earn. You don't demand it. I learned that silence is not weakness, that patience is not passivity, and that realizing early doesn't mean acting early. It means being prepared when the time comes. If you're going through something similar, if someone close to you is being treated like a burden instead of a person, pay attention. Notice it early. Protect those who need it, and don't underestimate those who seem quiet, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the only one who knows exactly what's going on. I'm going to finish my coffee now. I'm going to read my book. And tomorrow I'll wake up knowing I made the right choices. Not the easiest ones, but the right ones. And that, you know, is worth more than any family gathering. If this story resonated with you, if you felt like someone understood you here, leave a like now. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe. Because stories like this will continue and you deserve to hear them all. Thank you for staying with me until the end. See you next time.